By July, the Marvel Cinematic Universe will have 23 movies making up its shared universe since 2008. To put that into perspective, that's how many James Bond movies there's been since 1962. And the MCU has only had 2 Bruce Banners. Take that, Daniel Craig. On top of the cinematic juggernaut, there's also streaming shows like Netflix and Hulu, Cloak and Dagger on cable, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC. With all that content, it's only natural that there'd be teases and foreshadowing. Here's some of our favorites. It seems like forever ago when a struggling comic book publisher hired an actor with a troubled past, and a character no one thought was ready for primetime made a movie that changed the world. Seemingly overnight, Iron Man was a household name, Robert Downey Jr. was a star again, and Marvel Comics was big enough to end up on Disney's must-buy list. They will own us all in a few years. Going into the movie, we only had vague suggestions from the man we'd come to know as Kevin Feige, announcer of movies and dropper of clues about how this shared universe would work. The answer came in another soon-to-be staple, the post-credits scene. Nick Fury appears in Tony Stark's study with the Avengers initiative. There were still 4 movies to go, including another Iron Man movie, before the Avengers finally assembled. But it all started with that one dossier. As important as the Infinity Stones have been to what Feige now calls the Infinity Saga, there has been another thing that has helped shape and drive the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's a certain elusive formula from one Dr. Abraham Erskine. Dr. Erskine, of course, is responsible for creating the super soldier serum that gives Captain America the size and strength to match his outsized sense of duty. Unfortunately, Erskine dies in the ensuing attack by Hydra after turning scrawny Steve Rogers into burly Captain America, so no one is able to replicate it, or Erskine's careful subject selection process, but that hasn't stopped the MCU from trying. The Incredible Hulk was the second MCU movie, and when Hulk foe Emil Blonsky was looking for an edge against the Green Rage machine, he used a bastardized version of the formula we'd see later in Captain America, the First Avenger. In comic books and superhero stories in general, the science is usually turned all the way up to 11. While there are plenty of genres blended into superhero stories, science fiction is a big part of the superhero genre. This means that there are always a lot of crazy secret science experiments. Some of them result in a super soldier or a Hulk, while others have different implications. When Tony Stark needed to get some more information on how to deal with his palladium poisoning, he calls up 3 project files: Pegasus, Goliath, and Exodus. Hardcore comic fans recognize Project Pegasus under the acronym Potential Energy Group, alternate sources United States. In the main timeline, it becomes a prison, while in the Ultimates timeline, it was a superhouse for sources of unusual energy. In the MCU, it turned out to be a program meant to exploit the Tesseract. Project Goliath paid off when Goliath himself met Scott Lang, and they got to compare sizes. Boys will be boys, right? In the build-up to the first Avengers movie, the driving force of the MCU was Nick Fury's Avengers initiative. We now know that he decided the Earth needed such a thing once a space soldier fell through the roof of a blockbuster video and brought a millennium-long war to Earth's door. Once the Avengers had assembled and defeated Loki and the Chitauri, there was the question of what would be next for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Also, where did Loki get that scepter and alien army? The answer to both of these questions came in the smirk of someone who liked the idea of courting death. That purple smirker with the weird chin was Thanos. Even the courting death thing was a reference. While the MCU Thanos is a militant conservationalist, as long as you consider ending half all life in the universe conservation, in the comics he wiped out half of all life just to impress Lady Death. Now that's a crush. One of the signature moves for the Marvel Cinematic Universe when it comes to Easter eggs and comic book shoutouts is the casual name drop. Aside from our title heroes and their associates, we've gotten a small army of supporting characters who've had parts or at least been referenced in the movies. This practice resulted in the staggering number of Marvel characters in Infinity War, which featured 76 Marvel characters. Not a trombone among them. 76 trombones. Music Man? No? Okay, moving on. When S.H.I.E.L.D. got the idea to create Project Insight, a program that meant to use helicarriers linked by satellite to eliminate threats before they became a problem, there was a notable name drop in the process. Among the listed people of interest was one Dr. Stephen Strange. At the time, Strange's movie hadn't even been announced. Now, of course, he might be a key part of restoring the universe. The Marvel Universe is vast. It not only creates multiple universes or realities, but those realities are enormous, even if it all tends to come down to New York. Far from New York is the cosmic end of Marvel. For Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the only glimpses of cosmic Marvel came through the Avengers' hammer-throwing heavyweight Thor. That changed with the release of the Guardians of the Galaxy. At the center of this team of space misfits was Star-Lord, a boy from Earth named Peter Quill. We didn't know why he was abducted from Earth during that movie until a parting line from Yondu at the end, when he didn't regret turning Peter over to his father because his father was a jerk. Fans of the Guardians knew he had a celestial parentage, but he wouldn't know how right Yondu was until he met his dad Ego in Volume 2. Oh hey, it's Kurt Russell. We've been told that the fourth Avengers movie will be an ending of some kind. Kevin Feige, in an interview with Empire magazine, referred to the first 10 years of the MCU as the Infinity Saga, and wants to bring it to an epic conclusion and set the stage for the next era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. With all that importance on the fourth Avengers movie, the name was bound to be a rather important element. Originally, they listed it as Infinity War 1 and 2, but that was short-lived. The name was a tightly held secret, that is, until the director of photography updated his resume. It turns out, despite being told it wasn't something anyone had said in the MCU, it was actually said twice. First was Stark referring to alien invasions and his Ultron project, and the second was Doctor Strange's cryptic explanation as to why he gave up the Time Stone. Fans of just the cinematic end of Marvel might not understand the importance of the Wasp for Earth's mightiest heroes. Not only is the Shrinky-Dink hero a founding member in the comics, she's also responsible for the team's name. Original concept art showed hints that the Wasp was even planned for the first Avengers movie, but director Joss Whedon just couldn't make it work. After the reveal of the Wasp suit for Janet Van Dyne's daughter Hope, there was even more concept art for Wasp to appear in Civil War. It's not all cuts for the Wasp though, because Hope made the shrinking hero scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp. In that movie, they were searching for the lost Janet Van Dyne, who might still be in the quantum realm. Eagle-eyed viewers might have caught a glimpse of her there when Scott dipped into the tiny realm in Ant-Man. If you follow Spider-Man, you know he's had a bit of a bad luck when it comes to mentors. His best bud's dad turns out to be his worst enemy, the Green Goblin. His science mentor Kirk Connors becomes the Spider-Man hating lizard. Then there's the whole thing with Dr. Octavius. And that's not even to mention Uncle Ben. Poor Ben. So when Peter Parker made his way to the MCU, he got a new mentor in science bro Tony Stark. For Spidey's first MCU movie, that relationship got explored a little more as Tony Stark tried to get the ambitious Parker to stay a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and let the big guys handle Vulture. He tells young Peter that if something happens to Peter, he'd feel responsible, and he didn't need that on his conscience. That prediction comes back in the worst way as Peter turns to dust in Tony's arms. Not all foreshadowing comes as a surprise in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As they entered Phase 2 and 3, the folks at Marvel Studios became more and more confident and would lay out schedules of movies years in advance. This meant that there were plenty of opportunities to speculate on and ask questions about upcoming projects. Of course, not all announcements held up. The Inhumans went from movie to series to limited series to let's just forget about the Inhumans, shall we? There was plenty of time to anticipate Carol Danvers' debut in the MCU, knowing that her solo movie was slotted between Infinity War and Endgame. What we didn't know was how she'd fit in. The answer to that question came in the form of Nick Fury's hot-rodded 90s pager as the elusive director of S.H.I.E.L.D. turned to dust. We got both the pager and that Captain Marvel was Fury's ace in the hole once her standalone movie hit theaters. While the story of the Inhuman royal family didn't exactly go over as planned, understatement, the rest of the Inhumans have been having a run on the first MCU TV show, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Of all the Marvel TV and streaming shows, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has made the most effort in tying into the movie end of the MCU. In Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s second season, the episode Dirty Half Dozen managed to serve as a prelude to the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron. In the episode, we not only learn that the agents are the one who discovered where Loki's scepter has gotten to, but the Inhuman Rihanna also had a vision. Rihanna sees the scepter too, but also an army of metal men tearing cities apart, foreshadowing Ultron and his drones. Her last line is the most foreshadowing of all, saying nothing will be the same. Ultron ultimately leads to the Sokovia Accords and to Civil War. It seems hard to imagine, but some stories are actually too heavy for the MCU. For Iron Man, that story is Demon in the Bottle, where Marvel's favorite industrialist struggled with alcoholism. Why that's important lies in the foreshadowing that happened in the first Iron Man. In that movie, a different-looking James Rhodey Rhodes looks at a spare Iron Man suit and says, "Next time, baby." For fans of Iron Man, this was a nod to the time when Rhodes took over Iron Man for the alcoholic Tony Stark. When Tony got better, Tony gave Rhodes a heavy weapon suit designed to beat an enemy that was resistant to Iron Man's repulsors, becoming the War Machine. More than just an Easter egg for comic fans, it also foreshadowed Rhodes taking a suit from an irresponsible Stark in Iron Man 2. By the end of that movie, we got a fully equipped War Machine. Iron Man 2 had to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to moving the Marvel Cinematic Universe forward story-wise. The struggle between trying to tell the story of Whiplash and set up the upcoming Marvel movies put a strain on the film, but it did get plenty of hints of things to come in the MCU. One of those clues came in the form of a map of hotspots around the globe in the background. It was there, and in the early stages of Phase 1, we got our first glimpse of the breakaway star of Phase 3. It turns out that the hotspot the map had identified was a previously not well-known land of Wakanda. At this point, there was no concrete plans to introduce the Black Panther in the MCU. There are other clues that haven't paid off yet, like Namor's home in the middle of the Atlantic. That wasn't the only blink and you'll miss it hint of things to come. Tony had brought up all the research from 3 projects: Exodus, Goliath, and Pegasus. Pegasus and its connection to the Tesseract was more than just a name drop. It'd come up years later in Captain Marvel. While he's flipping through a notebook on the project, he briefly comes across a drawing of the Tesseract, or at least a theoretical drawing. A tesseract in math is a 4-dimensional cube. What does that mean? A lot of really complicated math, really. Tesseracts are generally drawn as a cube within a cube, which honestly is just more confusing. The Tesseract turned out to house one of the most important Infinity Stones in the MCU, the Space Stone. Red Skull and Nick Fury used it to create weapons, Project Pegasus was using it as an engine, and Loki used it to invade Earth. Before there was a smiling Thanos at the end of the Avengers, there were other clues that had entered the Infinity Saga. Like any good conquering king, Odin the Allfather had a rather extensive trophy room. Not only did it contain the casket of ancient winters that tipped Loki off that he might not be Asgardian, it also had a rather conspicuous golden glove with spots for stones. Of course, it was a right-handed glove instead of a left-handed one, and more importantly, it didn't fit the Mad Titan, who had to have his made by Eitri the Dwarf. By the time Thor Ragnarok rolled around, we were able to revisit the gauntlet despite Thanos putting his on, declaring that he'd do it by himself. By now, we all know what it means. Hela confirms what we had suspected, that Odin's was a fake. Captain America the Winter Soldier solidified the Marvel practice of merging a film genre with the superhero genre. For Winter Soldier, that genre was a political thriller. On top of facing his friend as a brainwashed programmable assassin, the Winter Soldier also dealt with the infiltration of S.H.I.E.L.D. by Hydra and their conspiracy to play on people's fears and take control with their satellite control helicarriers. When Cap sees his buddy as the Winter Soldier, he goes looking for answers, which Natasha gives him with a warning that reaches all the way up to the next Captain America movie. She warns Cap that he might not like what happens if he pulls on this thread. It turns out it's a hint at who of one of the Winter Soldier's targets was: a Mr. and Mrs. Stark, Tony's parents. It's that revelation that ultimately tear the Avengers apart. We already covered how important the Wasp was to the creation of the Avengers, and that she was slated to appear in 2 movies before ending up not making the cut. This meant that by the time we got into the Ant-Man movie, we were pretty deep in anticipating the Wasp. The original Wasp, Janet Van Dyne, made an appearance in a flashback that explained exactly why Hank Pym was reluctant to let his daughter get in on the family shrinking business. He was perfectly willing to let Scott Lang take that risk, though. Even with that, Pym is not as big a jerk as he is in the comics. This meant that we waited a whole movie and never got the Wasp once again. That is, until the post-credit scene where Hank introduces his daughter to her new suit. After the false start, her reaction was perfect. It's about time. You go get it, girl! There are a few key characters in the cosmic end of the MCU. Some of those characters were locked away until recently at Fox with the Fantastic Four properties like Galactus and his heralds. Not stowed away with Fox was another figure, one who's key to the Infinity Gauntlet series in the comics, a cosmic entity known as Adam Warlock. Warlock was a founding member of the Infinity Watch to make sure no one got all the stones again, which didn't work out, and also, at one point, he took up residence inside the Soul Stone. Warlock has gotten not 1 but 2 foreshadows, both in the form of the cocoon he uses to rejuvenate himself. Despite that, Gunn has confirmed Warlock won't appear in Endgame and is only a maybe in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But we mean he's totally going to be in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. At least he better be. Some foreshadowing has yet to come, and maybe it won't. Somewhere in a dark secret room, there's still a marker over Namor's name with no Namor in the MCU. Yet. One thing we know is that things will change, and change big time once Endgame rolls its credits. One of the changes that's been hinted at for the future is the Young Avengers. Not everyone in the Young Avengers is a scion of one of the original Earth's mightiest heroes. Iron Lad is actually a young Kang the Conqueror, who for some reason used time travel to impress his younger self, and it backfired. Hulkling is actually a Skrull, but there's at least one child of an Avenger in the Young Avengers, and that's a teenager nicknamed Stature. When a young Cassie Lang volunteers to be her dad's sidekick, we get a glimpse of the hero she might become. One hint of future things to come is in the form of Captain America's bestie from the beginning, one Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier or White Wolf, depending on who you're asking. The unfrozen super soldier has come and gone more than a few times in the comic books, not just in the Arctic ice, but also for various other reasons, including not coming out of the Civil War event alive. Of course, no one stays dead in the comic books. They used to say, except Bucky Barnes, but Bucky is alive and kicking. Not only that, but Barnes has been known to take up the mantle of Captain America when Cap has seemed to go down for the count. Whether or not Sebastian Stan will take over for Chris Evans remains to be seen, but all those times Bucky has gotten Steve's shield is a fair homage to Bucky's legacy as a stand-in for Captain America. There are some of the times that MCU has hinted at future events or characters. What are some of your favorites? What Easter eggs have got you excited for something to come? Let us know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to CBR and ring that notification bell for more MCU content. Thanks for watching.